Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we go over the Sunday morning news shows, excuse me, not the shoes, Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well.
Good.
We have a lot of clips this week to get to because there was so much action on Sunday.
So much
Even
action.
though, bad news, everybody.
Yeah, I hope you guys are sitting down.
The Chuckster was off this week, so no Meet the Press.
No Meet the Press.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to start off the week on such a sad note, but
yeah,
we'll make it up to you.
Yeah, we'll make it up to you. Yeah. All right, so should we start with our first clip? What do we got?
Well, so actually, this is a case where the Sunday news shows and all their brilliance were very prescient because last week, Katie, you weren't here, but we played a clip from Meet the Press where Chuck Todd commissioned a war game with a warmongering think tank that's funded by the military-industrial complex, the Center for New American Security. And the war game is basically, gaming out a war between the U.S. and China. And here we are in the midst of an actual war with Russia right now, a proxy war in Ukraine. And as we pointed out last week, that wasn't enough for Chuck Todd and the military-industrial complex. They wanted to see what would it be like to have a war with China. And lo and behold, 1 week later, Joe Biden, just this morning, and this is some breaking news, Joe Biden has moved that ball forward, and he has said that the U.S. would military intervene if China goes to war with Taiwan. So let's see what Joe Biden just said today. This is some breaking news.
Wow.
To get involved in the Ukraine conflict militarily for obvious reasons. Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made. That's the commitment we made. We are not, look, here's the situation. We agree with a one China policy. We signed on to it and all the attendant agreements made from there. But the idea that it can be taken by force, just taken by force, is just not appropriate. It will dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine. And so it's a burden that is even stronger.
Wow, even stronger.
Okay. So first of all, shout out to Chuck Todd. We were making fun of him last week for gaming out a war that hasn't even happened yet. But here's the president confirming that he would do it. And there's so much wrong with that clip. First of all, he says that that's the commitment we've already made to military intervene against China. No, he hasn't. So now he's making that for the first time. And already the White House is trying to walk it back, and they're saying that, no, what he meant is we would help Taiwan defend itself, just like we've helped Ukraine defend itself with the Russia invasion. But that's not what Biden said. Biden said, yes, I would intervene militarily.
And that we've already promised to do so.
Yeah. So anyway, great job, Joe Biden, for once again saying something insane. And great job, Chuck Todd, for calling it.
Yeah, maybe Chuck inspired Biden.
Yeah. Maybe Biden watched it on Monday morning last week.
And you're right. We inspired Biden.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
Wow.
And Biden's new earpiece, doesn't that remind you of that? You know that Ronald Reagan sketch with Robin Williams where he's doing a speech and he has the earpiece in and they're all feeding it to him, but then they lose the signal and it goes to the radio and he starts doing the MLB games and then Spanish radio. And it's, I think Biden could totally start doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in that clip, you see the answer he gives off the cuff and off script is yes when he's asked if he would intervene militarily. After he says that, then he reverts to his script, and then he's talking about something, about the one China policy. But yeah, that would be very appropriate for Biden.
Yeah, and it is a good earpiece. Yeah, we like the earpiece. All right, what do we got next? We got Face the Nation, and we got Robert Gates, former defense secretary.
Last week, President Biden welcomed the heads of Finland and Sweden to the White House in honor of both countries' declaration to join NATO. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates tells us why this move will have such an enormous impact on Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Western military alliance.
I think it's huge, Margaret. I think it changes the geopolitics in Europe in a dramatic way. Now he's got NATO on his doorstep, not only in Ukraine and elsewhere, He's going to have them on his border in Finland. And
So I hope people caught that admission right there. Ukraine is not officially in NATO. And what we're told is that actually, Russia had nothing to worry about because Ukrainian membership in NATO was many, many years away. So Russia had no reason to act. The former defense secretary right here, and we'll play it again, is admitting that actually NATO is in Ukraine, which has kind of been the point of U.S. policy for the last 8 years. And it's a refusal to take that off the table and just commit to Ukrainian neutrality that played a large role in this crisis. But let's hear him admit it one more time, because you don't hear this admitted so often.
Enormous impact on Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Western military alliance.
I think it's huge, Margaret. I think it changes the geopolitics in Europe in a dramatic way. Now he's got NATO on his doorstep, not only in Ukraine and elsewhere. He's going to have them on his border in Finland. And it's an amazing thing he's done, because he's gotten Sweden to abandon 200 years of neutrality. So I think Putin, one of his many huge miscalculations in invading Ukraine, is he has dramatically changed the geostrategic posture of Western Europe. And now that you have the Swedes and the Finns as part of that, he's really put Russia in a much worse strategic position than it had before the invasion.
But he could still win. Vladimir.
So, I think you could certainly argue that Putin has put Russia in a worse position. That's definitely something that is worth considering. I think you can make a very strong case for it. But what he says there about NATO being in Ukraine, that is a slip, because we're supposed to believe that Russia had nothing to worry about when it comes to NATO being in Ukraine, because even though NATO membership was promised to Ukraine, it was not being implemented. But he's acknowledging right there that actually NATO was on Russia's doorstep in Ukraine. And so, I don't know. I just thought that was a pretty...
Yeah. Do you think he meant to say that?
Well, he's not in government, so he doesn't have to adhere to strict message discipline. So, yeah, I mean, this is what happens, especially former officials have a bit more of ability to speak freely. So that's what he was doing. He was acknowledging what the reality is.
Interesting. It's still shocking to hear something that undermines the official narrative, even if someone's not in government.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if he meant to say that. Maybe he was inspired by Biden, by Biden's off-the-cuff nature. Yeah.
Well, we have more wisdom from Robert Gates.
Yeah.
He is speaking here about more about Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think the administration was slow to come to Ukraine's help last year. I think we could have sent weapons sooner, and more of the kind of weapons we're sending now. That said, I think beginning in the late fall, early winter, when they began releasing the intelligence to demonstrate what Putin's intentions were going to be, I think they've handled this well. I think that they deserve to be commended for the speed with which they put together a coalition. The president put together a coalition. I think it's extraordinary, the getting unanimity on the severity of the sanctions on Russia. The turn of attitudes in Europe has been in no small part due to American leadership and American intelligence. And
what he means there is getting Europe on board with sanctions against Russia and cutting off Russian energy, basically getting Europe to commit economic suicide and sabotage their own economy.
Starvation, yeah.
He's saying he's crediting American leadership. What he means is American bullying.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Because Europe, especially Germany, was hesitant to get on board with all this. But, the Biden administration carried out sufficient coercion to get everybody on board. And that's what he's so happy about. And by the way, really, it's been a week of really amazing Freudian slips. So we had Gates just now admitting that Ukraine was about bringing the Ukraine crisis was basically about bringing Ukraine into NATO. Ukraine is now in NATO, essentially. That's what he was saying. And what else happened this week? George W. Bush.
Oh my God.
That the Iraq war was brutal and criminal.
Yeah, that was insane. We got to show that. Maybe that'll be we got to show that this week.
We can close with that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll close with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a little bit more.
Putin's brutality. So I think that they've handled it properly. I think the president made the right decision on no-fly zone. I think that he's made the right decision not to react to Putin's threat of using nuclear weapons, just kind of cooling it on that. So I think beginning last early winter, late fall, I think they've handled it pretty well since then.
So that's
Okay.
good to know. He's acting in accordance to Robert Gates' wishes.
Yes, Biden has the stamp of approval of Robert Gates, and we're going to see how much that is worth in the next clip, where Gates shares his views on Afghanistan, and I think that will give us a pretty good window into Gates' judgment when it comes to foreign wars.
How do you personally process that? How do you say it was worth it?
Well, what I tell them is that they bought the Afghans 20 years of development, of opportunity for women, of the opportunity for freedom of the press. People who weren't in Afghanistan never realized how much of a free press Afghanistan had while we were there. The schooling for girls, the building of health centers within an hour's walk of villages. We accomplished a lot in Afghanistan.
So, of course, Margaret Brennan's not going to bring up the Inspector General report that the Washington Post exposed a year or two ago, where they documented that all this money was going to hospitals in Afghanistan that weren't being built.
Right.
That for all the hundreds of millions of dollars that were spent on infrastructure, that actually there was very little to show for it. And of course, that's documented. That's in the Pentagon's own reports, but it's not to be mentioned here. But we should mention it because it's true.
Right.
And what he's saying is a lie. And it's true. Look, in Kabul, there was freedom of the press, and it was great for people there. But the problem is it's a country far beyond the capital.
Right.
And the rest of the country for 20 years was a war zone. And the Taliban increasingly got more territory because the war was going so terribly for the U.S. and its allies. So that's the part he's leaving out here.
Right. Also, it's interesting because it's the lack of freedom of press that makes it so that we don't know the truth about Afghanistan.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And of course, some of the stuff we know about Afghanistan comes from places like WikiLeaks, which of course is under attack. So if only we had the free press that Kabul had.
Exactly. Exactly.
This is 1 second. I just want to show. Someone wrote, "How gross is C. Hayes, Chris Hayes shilling for Nina Jankowicz?" So we got to look into that. Do you know what that's a reference to, Aaron?
Yeah, we can play that clip if we have time.
Okay.
Actually, I was thinking it might be a good idea to do a Nina Jankowicz update because she's such a fan favorite.
Yeah.
She is
the
now ousted head of the new Disinformation Governance Board, and she's been doing a media tour, basically complaining that she's been the victim of disinformation herself.
Right.
The head of disinformation is now the victim of disinformation. So Chris Hayes had her on, so we can play that clip later.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, and I think that we're part of that because our interview with Lev Golinkin, I think we helped expose her.
We certainly piled on, because how can you not make fun of someone who not only claims the authority to spread to censor disinformation, but does so after spreading disinformation herself constantly. But and in the case of our guest Lev Golinkin, which people should check out if they haven't read it, Lev wrote an article in the Nation magazine. We talked to him about it, where Nina Jankowicz's disinformation included working with a U.S. government-funded propaganda organization to whitewash neo-Nazi groups inside Ukraine. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Gates.
Back to Gates.
We kind of gave them the same chance we gave the Iraqis.
I love that.
The Iraqis have taken better advantage of the opportunity.
So we gave them the chance of illegally invading your country and killing untold numbers of civilians and destroying your civilian infrastructure and preventing any hopeful future, setting off sectarian war. I mean, yeah, that's true. They did do that in Afghanistan as well.
Great chances, such an opportunity. Yeah, I like that. It's like, where are we going to give a chance to next? Instead of like where to invade next.
Yeah. Oh my God. Who is the next lucky recipient of our lucky chance?
Yeah.
Okay.
We gave them. Iraq has a very flawed democracy today, but it's the only democracy in the Middle East. And
what?
Not true.
What?
Not
I thought
true.
Israel was.
Well, what's funny about this is, like, I mean, he's speaking in a racist framing, where he's not even thinking about Israel. He's only talking about like the bad guy states in the Middle East. That's how he's defining the Middle East.
Right.
But he's forgetting.
But it's still off message.
He's forgetting, for example, the democracy of Palestine, where the last time Palestinians held an election, the wrong people won. So the Bush administration, which Gates served under, organized a coup and tried to basically overthrow the leaders of Gaza, which was Hamas, because Hamas won the last free Palestinian elections in 2006. And so the Bush administration, Gates' administration, organized a coup to try to overthrow them, and it failed. And Hamas has controlled Gaza ever since. So he's forgetting about the last time the U.S. allowed democracy in the Middle East, and when they did, they immediately tried to undermine it.
Right. I mean, I would push back a little bit, say that there isn't democracy there, but that's because of Israel.
Well, certainly inside Israel is not you can't call it a democracy when
right.
millions of Palestinians don't have the right to vote for the government that rules over them. But I'm saying inside the territories, inside Gaza and the West Bank, there was a vote. It was a free democratic vote. I think Jimmy Carter came over and monitored it.
Yeah.
It was free. And then the U.S. just refused to accept the results. So that was the U.S. commitment to democracy in the Middle East.
Also, there's Lebanon.
Yeah. Lebanon has a vote system as well.
Yeah.
And recently, and actually just held a vote this week or last week.
But I do think it's interesting. I know what you're saying, that when he's saying the Middle East, he's referring to the savages, quote unquote, or the people we know that he thinks of that way. But it still does counter the official narrative, which is, how many times have we heard politicians say Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's going a little rogue. Yeah.
Politicians are at least shouting at each other, not shooting at each other. And we presented the same kind of opportunity with the surge in 2010 in Afghanistan.
So many opportunities.
We basically pushed the Taliban mostly out of Kandahar, out of Helmand and places like that. But we couldn't hold it forever without the Afghans doing their part, and that meant the politicians in Afghanistan, and they simply failed to take advantage of the opportunity we gave them. So I tell the young men and women who served, you did an amazing thing, you did your job, you accomplished the mission, your mission, which was to push the Taliban out and keep Al-Qaeda out. They did that, and you gave the Afghans tremendous opportunities. That was an extraordinary achievement
that they squandered.
Those ungrateful Afghans did not appreciate the opportunity that Bill Gates and his colleagues gave them. When, by the way, look, it was obvious with the surge that the war was over. Everyone in the top U.S. military command, including Robert Gates, knew it. But they convinced Obama to do a surge just because basically they wanted to keep the war going. It was profitable, and they didn't want to admit defeat. That's what the surge actually was. And he talks about, by the way, defeating Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
Pushing out the Taliban.
Al-Qaeda was defeated pretty early on in the war. The decision to prolong the war actually gave them a resurgence and let them essentially relocate everywhere else around the world, including in neighboring Pakistan. And the group that he forgets here is ISIS, which actually benefited from the U.S. military occupation because they thrived in the chaos of that war, just as they did in Syria and Iraq as well. So anyway, these are the geniuses who are presented to us as experts.
Yeah, highlighting the lack of gratitude. Really, Robert Gates should send some gratitude meditations to the people of Afghanistan. Maybe that would have made all the difference.
I'd love to see a tape of that, like Robert Gates' guided gratitude meditations.
Yeah.
For the people of Afghanistan toward the occupiers.
Yeah, he should just send it to all countries that we could potentially invade, that we could potentially provide with chances, as he calls it. Yeah. Can we quickly watch this this clip of Gates commenting? I don't want to give it away, but that other thing that we have of Gates, Wilson.
Hope somebody around Putin is reminding him is that in that part of the world, and particularly in eastern Ukraine, the winds tend to blow from the west. If you set off a tactical nuclear weapon in eastern Ukraine, the radiation's gonna go into Russia. So I just hope somebody reminds him of that. Hope somebody around Putin is reminding him is that in that part of the world, and particularly in eastern Ukraine, the winds tend to blow from the west. If you set off a tactical nuclear weapon in eastern Ukraine, the radiation's gonna go into Russia. So I just hope somebody reminds him of that.
So he seems like kind of entertained by the possibility of Putin using nukes. It's a little weird.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, in terms of the direction of the wind, I'm pretty sure Russian officials know about that one.
Yeah, they may know. They may, just may know.
That's an important reminder.
Yeah,
Bob.
it is. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but look, honestly, at least he's in a rare that's a rare case of him saying something that's not in the direction of warmongering. He's actually saying we don't want to have a nuclear war. So even though it's kind of he's saying the obvious about the direction of the wind and no shit, at least he's like saying something that can be construed as not promoting nuclear war. So I guess that's a positive for him.
Yeah, but I also feel like downplaying it as something that would like clearly not be in Russia's best interest because of the direction of the wind allows us to ratchet up the war because the nuclear thing is no longer a deterrent.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. All right, who do we got next?
Florida Senator Rick Scott. He's the Republican tasked with winning the Senate majority for the GOP.
Just look at his face, guys. Trigger warning. He looks like he's some creature. I don't know what he looks like. Like a weird, like a neutered Skeletor or something, but his very weird expressions and head movements. Okay.
In this year's midterm elections, and he joins us from Naples, Florida. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Margaret. I think those numbers are consistent with what we've seen, that inflation is still the #1 issue in the country, and the president is slow to react, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, whether it's gas prices, even Ukraine. I think the expectation is that whoever the president is gets ahead of the problems rather than behind the problems. So I think the election this fall is going to be about inflation. It's going to be about the effectiveness of the Biden administration, and I think it bodes well for Republicans.
So what's weird about that, besides the fact that he is a Nosferatu alien golem, what else did someone put in? Someone put in a naked mole rat. Is that he's probably right. Like, for better or for worse, that the election will be about inflation, and that does bode well for Republicans. The midterms, speaking of the midterms, and also 2024.
But wait, they probably just haven't heard Joe Biden's response, which is that this is all just Putin's price hike.
Oh, it's true. You're right. So forget that. Yeah,
once Biden drops that, the game's changed.
Right. Once he
how can Republicans counter that one? Yeah.
But have no fear, Aaron, because it turns out we don't have to worry. The Democrats, I should say, don't have to worry, because let's take a listen to Representative Hakeem Jeffries.
Fellow Democrats who are up for election, this bit from our poll may stand out. More than a third of Democrats call their own party weak. And that is particularly acute among young people, 41%. That could hurt your turnout. How do you respond to that? Is there time for change here in terms of congressional leadership?
No, I think led by Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer, we've been acting decisively. Just this week, we responded by passing legislation to address the price gouging that we believe, particularly as it relates to the oil and gas industry is taking place and hurting the American consumer. We, of course, passed legislation to deal with the rise in domestic terrorism and white supremacy in this country.
Said that law wasn't needed.
Unfortunately, every single Republican, except for about one or two, voted against this in the immediate aftermath of the tragic massacre in Buffalo. So we are acting decisively, but I think we do have to crystallize the differences between what we're about and what Republicans are all about. It's clear that Washington Republicans want to raise taxes on everyday Americans, on police officers, on firefighters, on nurses, on factory workers, on grocery store clerks, and we are trying to provide them with relief. The Republicans, including your prior guest, actually want to end Social Security and Medicare as we know it in 5 years, forcing it to sunset. Those are serious differences between the two parties, and I think once the voters understand that dynamic, the choice will be as clear as a sunny day in San Diego.
He was joining, by the way, from San Diego. You should know. So that makes it, especially a zinger, especially strong as a zinger.
And that shows strength. The fact that you can reference your location, that's not weak.
No.
That's not weak. That's strength.
Right. So all those people are totally wrong when they're saying the Democrats are weak.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty harsh question. Like, sir, your own supporters think you're weak. What's your response to that?
Yeah. And her body language was interesting there. She was like really leaning away from him.
It's like, you're so weak, I don't even want to be near you.
Yeah.
Your weakness is so infectious. And your weakness is so strong. I'm worried it will rub off on me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Wilson, can we show just the opening frame of that again? So
fellow Democrats,
look at that.
Not leaning back. She's leaning back.
Leaning back.
You are weak, sir.
Yeah.
You are weak.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we're passing legislation to address that.
Yeah, no, which apparently, I guess Biden said was unneeded. That was awkward.
That was about the white supremacy legislation.
Yeah.
I missed that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is pretty funny. Yeah. He ignored that. By the way, Hakeem Jeffries is the one who called Bernie a gun-toting socialist.
Really?
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I ran into him last summer.
Oh, where?
In Brooklyn, and he was friendly.
I just high five?
Say it again.
Did you give him a high five or something?
I did not give him a high five. No.
Okay.
No. Here, I'll just mute myself because I have a siren coming in.
Okay. I'm curious what Aaron did with him. Did he run into him on the street? Was it at a party? Did he?
It was on the street. He was campaigning for what's her name? Maya Wiley.
Right.
He was campaigning for mayor, and I just got back from Syria, and so I asked him, like, so that was on my mind, and I'd witnessed the impact of U.S. sanctions that were denying civilians medicine and food, and so I asked him about that. He said, "Yeah, it's a terrible thing." Anyway, and that was it.
Oh, he did. Wow.
Good but and I was like, well, so are you going to do anything to address it? He's like, yeah. I mean, he didn't answer that basically.
Yeah.
He walked away. But
my mom wrote him an angry email after he said that about Bernie, because my friend worked for him years and years, like 6 years ago or something. So we went to a fundraiser, and she said that she was no longer going to support him. I don't think it was a recurring donation. We paid admission to a party. Yeah. And it wasn't very expensive. Don't worry, guys.
Yeah. Well, I'll call Bernie a military industrial complex enabling socialist. Because that's what he is now after voting for the $40 billion.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway,
that's fair.
Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
That's another story. All right. Well, thank you, Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah, we can skip. We have another Hakeem, but we can skip that one. We don't need double Hakeem.
The takeaway is that he's not weak. Democrats are not weak.
They're strong. Yeah.
They're strong.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to this clip of us from State of the Union with Asa Hutchinson.
We talked about Oklahoma a lot this week, got a lot of attention for banning abortion, as I said, starting at fertilization. But Governor, in 2019, you signed a law in Arkansas that would do the same if Roe v. Wade is overturned, and your law only has exceptions for the life of the mother. So just want to be clear, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, no woman, unless her life is at risk, will be able to get an abortion in Arkansas?
If Roe versus Wade is reversed, then the trigger law in Arkansas would come into effect. And whenever I signed that law, I did express that I support also the exceptions of rape and incest. So the life of the mother and rape and incest are two exceptions that I believe should have been added that did not have the support in the General Assembly. And so we have to wait and see what the Supreme Court actually does. But if that Roe versus Wade is reversed, then what we've fought for 40 years and returning the authority back to the states will actually happen. You'll see states making different decisions based upon the values and the consensus of the people of that state. In Arkansas, we actually passed a constitutional amendment supporting the life of the unborn and recognizing that. And so the will of the people of Arkansas has been expressed.
Governor, you did sign the law that does not include any exceptions for rape and incest. I know you said that you would rather that not be part of the law, but it is, and you signed it. So I want to discuss the real world implications of this. For example, why should an 11 or a 12-year-old girl who's impregnated by her father or her uncle or another family member be forced to carry that child to term?
I agree with you. I've had to deal with that particular circumstance even as governor. And while it's still life in the womb, life of the unborn, the conception was under criminal circumstances, either incest or rape. And so those are two exceptions I have recognized, I believe are very appropriate. And what will happen as time goes on, if Roe versus Wade is reversed, these are going to become very real circumstances. I think the debate and discussion will continue, and that very well could be revisited.
But Governor, what if it can't be? I mean, you wanted the legislature in Arkansas to put those exceptions in. They didn't. Your term is almost up. What makes you think you can change it? And
what's interesting, by the way, is that he kind of admits that for people like him, he says it is life, but it was the process was criminal, which shows that he doesn't really think it's life. Because if you did, that wouldn't matter. Not that I want him to be anti-exceptions for rape and incest.
Yeah, and is he saying he signed legislation he doesn't agree with?
Yeah.
So he just basically wishes it didn't contain what he signed into law.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Which you could also just not sign that.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing thing to do. But he thinks there's going to be some kumbaya moment where people come together and, exchange ideas about the most democratic way to take away women's reproductive rights.
and if you can't, that means that people who are still girls who are still children, 11 and 12-year-olds, might be in this situation in a very real way in just a couple of months, potentially.
Well, those are heartbreaking circumstances.
Not that heartbreaking.
That's where,
apparently,
in the last few years, when we passed these trigger laws, we're expressing a belief. We're trying to return that authority to the states and to reduce abortions. But whenever you see real-life circumstances like that, that debate is going to continue. And the will of the people may or may not change. But it's going to come back to the state's flexibility on that. I believe that those exceptions are going to be important in overall to save lives, because the public understands those exceptions, the importance of it. So I think that will be revisited. There's no guarantee of that, but the public opinion does matter whenever you come to your elected representatives.
So he's basically arguing there that because it's not popular to ban abortion in cases of rape and incest, it'll undermine it as a trigger. The trigger law will be undermined, and so it will be reincorporated as an exception, which will make it more politically viable. Speaking of viability. Yeah. Which again, which again, he could just not sign that law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is where Democrats are really blessed, I think, to have these people as their opponents, and news anchors who are usually so subservient to politicians. This position is so crazy that this gives them a good opportunity to look as if they're adversarial, because how can you not be with people who are passing laws that ban abortion, even for the circumstances that she lays out, which are, as he admits, are criminal.
Right. It is really insane. All right. Ugh, I can't believe that. So there'll be a debate, but in the meantime, young girls who are raped by relatives will be forced to carry their pregnancies to term. All right, good to know. While the debate, I'm sure there'll be a robust debate that the likes of which would make Thomas Jefferson proud. Okay. All right. What do we got next? Oh, this is a good one. We got some Martha Raddatz at This Week.
Biden has called recent nuclear threats from Russian officials irresponsible. And this morning, with North Korea poised to test a nuclear weapon for the first time in 5 years, the administration says it is prepared for any contingency. The U.S. still has thousands of strategic nuclear weapons in its arsenal, 70% of them on submarines. We spent 24 hours in the Pacific with exclusive access inside one of America's nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarines.
It is a mesmerizing sight. The USS Maine, normally unseen and undetectable, briefly surfacing off the coast of Hawaii. Stretching the length of 2 football fields, it is the most destructive warship ever built, bristling with nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles.
Raptor Guardian, if you can you guys come a mile north?
Did she say bristling?
Yeah.
Bristling. Yeah. It's gross. Sounds so sexual. Bristling with nuclear tipped missiles. Ugh.
I know, just the tip.
Yeah.
Also, it does look like a big sperm whale. Yeah.
Rendezvous spot, please.
And all along there, all those squares are missile hatches.
Those are missile hatches, and I'll walk you on board of those. But there's 12 on this side, on the starboard side, and 12 on the port side.
Vice Admiral Bill Houston is the commander of U.S. submarine forces, granting us exclusive access to this warship as tensions around the world grow.
We're in unprecedented times. When you take a look at the Cold War, it was United States and the Soviet Union as 2 nuclear competitors, potential adversaries. What you have now is you have China and Russia are near nuclear peer competitors against the United States.
But Houston's mission has not changed. Deterrence. There are 20 ballistic missiles in these orange launch tubes, topped with nuclear warheads. Lots of them, 12 each, meaning 240 nuclear weapons. Quite the deterrent.
We're out here to prevent nuclear war. That's what we're doing day to day. 7-0. 7-2.
And
we're out here to prevent nuclear war by sailing around the world with nuclear-tipped weapons, which, by the way, have almost caused nuclear war before. There have been incidents between the U.S., back during the Cold War, the Soviet Union, where the Soviet Union thought that they detected a launch, and Russian officials had something like 3 minutes or something to decide whether or not this was a false alarm or whether this was real. And thankfully, they made the right call. But we've come so close before because of ships like these that are, this is what creates the threats. People don't consider, why don't we just, abolish all these world-destroying weapons? That's not even on the table.
Right. No, of course not. We couldn't do that. We have to continue with the bristle. Operation Bristle.
Operation Bristle.
Preventing war means practicing for one.
Dive.
Amazing. Preventing
war means practicing for one.
Yeah.
That is great.
Do you know what that reminds me of? When I was in the 3rd grade, one day in our schoolyard, somebody threw some rocks. And they didn't hit anybody, but there was like a warning, like, don't throw rocks. So me and my friends, we started a group called the Rockstoppers, right? And we're like, our mission in our minds was we were going to stop the throwing of rocks. But really what we ended up doing was we ended up taking rocks ourselves and practicing how to throw them to prevent the throwing of rocks. And we convinced ourselves that we were really a peacekeeping mission. But really what we were doing is we just wanted an excuse to throw rocks under the guise of keeping the peace. So that's really what the U.S. is doing now, and Russia too, except the rocks are nuclear weapons.
Right. And yet, did it work?
Well, no, no. In fact, we got in trouble for throwing rocks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I appreciate your effort, though.
No, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, your crime-stopping effort. Someone asked, did you guys see the 80s movie Spies Like Us? I did see that movie.
Yeah, I don't remember it, though.
Yeah, I think there's a really funny scene, if I'm remembering correctly, where Chevy Chase cheats on a test, and he has like a cast on and a head, like a injury. I don't even know the words for it. Honestly, it's still early. He has all this gear on that you would wear when you were injured, a crutch, and he's obviously cheating and looking at other people's things. It's a funny scene. Anyway, yeah. All right. Should we keep watching, or do you want to go to another clip?
We can see a bit more of that clip. It's pretty funny.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Below deck, now hundreds of feet deep in the Pacific, the crew simulates a nuclear launch. An adversary has attacked with a strategic nuclear weapon, and the president in this exercise has ordered this submarine crew to respond.
Authorized entry into the training CIP key safe has been granted.
2 junior officers open a safe containing the key for this simulation. The trigger is pulled. The exercise a success.
Notice how they both grabbed it at the same time.
I know.
Maybe that's the rule, but it seemed like the guy was like, he wanted a piece of it too.
I know.
The woman had the person like, no, I want the key.
And
I want the key.
They're gonna fight over it, and then it'll go, and they'll lose it. It'll be thrown.
Yeah, and then we have a nuclear holocaust.
Right.
That's how the world ends.
In February of 2020, an unarmed ballistic missile aimed like all those on board at isolated ocean areas was test launched off this very submarine. Missiles capable of traveling up to 4,000 miles to pinpoint a target.
We can put it.
Do you want to know why that missile was tested in early 2020?
Why?
Because that was right after Donald J. Trump, the supposed puppet of Vladimir Putin, and this was the dominant talking point, of course, at that time. That was right after he pulled out of the INF Treaty, which was a major Cold War pact that had eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. It was reached between Reagan and Gorbachev. It was a great thing.
Right.
But Donald Trump, while his opposition was screaming about he was a Russian asset and how he was going to destroy America from within because he's really a Manchurian candidate, Donald Trump listened to his national security advisor, John Bolton, who thought it would be a great idea to continue dismantling arms control and basically destroy a treaty that had eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. And destroying that treaty meant that the U.S. could once again test weapons like this. We never heard about it really in the media and from Democrats because they were too concerned with believing that Donald Trump was really a Russian asset. So thank you once again, Russiagate, for bringing us moments such as that. And that was one result of this Russiagate mania, is looking the other way as the U.S. under Trump starts retesting nuclear weapons and allowing the U.S. to build those weapons and position them once again, which they previously were not allowed to do. But let's hear what this guy says, because I think this is the part where he
inside a baseball stadium.
Yeah.
And with the
kind of what?
I think it's the part where he kind of has an orgasmic moment over the launch of one of these things.
Okay, yeah. He's bristling.
destructive power that you can carry on one of those missiles is very, very capable.
Commander Darren Gerhardt has been on board during a test launch.
It's pretty incredible when you're near it, because just the amount of energy necessary to lift that missile causes the entire deck to lift up and vibrate as that weight of the missile is leaving the submarine.
All right. It's obvious what he's really talking about. It's very amazing being near it as it lifts up, and the propulsive energy as it vibrates.
Yeah.
It's just so powerful.
He's a little too excited.
Yeah.
He should have practiced his delivery to tamp it down a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I think that's enough.
Yeah, we're gonna get too excited if we watch any more
nuclear content. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What do we got next?
Joining me is Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. You know what happens on those submarines. You know about our nuclear arsenal. Clearly, the U.S. wants Russia and North Korea to remember what the U.S. has in its arsenal. But do you think there is a possibility that Vladimir Putin would actually use a nuclear weapon, even a small tactical nuclear weapon?
It's very difficult to know what Putin is thinking at any particular time. He's obviously spoken to this. I think we need to make sure that we consider it as a possibility, both a tactical and God forbid, the strategic force. We have it there to deter both he and China and others that might get nuclear weapons. And I certainly hope that that deterrence works. They're the most devastating weapons ever created on Earth. We should remind that as the country that's actually used them in the 1940s, how devastating they are, and do everything we possibly can to make sure that they don't get used. But they are a part of Putin's arsenal. He's pretty well cornered and boxed in, so we certainly have to consider it's a possible action he can take.
It's interesting that he says he's pretty well cornered and boxed in, so that's a possibility you could take. Makes you think maybe that should be taken into account.
Yeah, so if he's pretty well cornered and boxed in, then instead of spending $40 billion on more weapons, as the U.S. is doing now, Biden just signed that into law. Again, that was approved by the entire Democratic Party, including Bernie Sanders and the squad. Instead of sending more weapons to further box him in, why not think of ways to offer him a way out?
Right. A golden staircase, as they talk about in The Art of War.
Yeah.
Which is what you're supposed to offer your enemy.
Yeah.
When he's a threat.
Instead of a nuclear escalation ladder.
Right.
And that's really what the U.S. is offering him right now.
By the way, just a very important PSA. So thank you, Amberly Griego. So I got the notification that this live stream is happening. And then when I pop into the actual video, it says I'm unsubscribed from the Useful Idiots. F YouTube, man. Which is a reminder, everyone check that you're subscribed. Hit the subscribe button. And then hit the bell. And also, please like this stream. We forgot to pressure you and browbeat you at the beginning of the stream. Please like it. And by the way, another announcement I forgot to make at the beginning is that we will be doing a call-in after this. So we know that you don't feel like you have enough time with us during this hour, and you are in luck. We will answer your questions starting at 11 on call-in. The link is in the description. And thank you, Amberly, for being so vigilant about the war on Useful Idiots. See, someone else said, holy shit, I was unsubbed. These tech overlords are trying to undermine us. And not only is liking a video a quick way to let a video creator know that you enjoyed their work, which of course we love, but it's also a good way to fight against YouTube suppression. Yes, thank you. All right.
The powers that be do not want us analyzing the sexual undertones of corporate news, war propaganda, but we will refuse to back down. We will always be looking out for any kind of phallic reference in a nuclear tip segment, such as the one we just saw.
Yeah. So just the like, just the tip, just the like, guys.
Just the like.
Yeah. Okay. We have another Mullen clip for you. This one's interesting.
Mark Milley, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke to his Russian counterpart Thursday for the first time. Since February 11th, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke to his counterpart. How encouraging is that? And were you surprised by that? The Russians at first had no contact.
No, I wasn't surprised by it. I have worried that we've had no communications with Russia at any level, from the presidency on down to the military. So I am encouraged that those communication channels are back open. I think those are critical to make sure that we don't miscalculate and that we have a way to communicate.
What does it mean that they're talking?
Well, it's hard to know. It's a big step in terms of being able to talk about how we continue, if you will, in this fight. And hopefully It's a start of a path to get to some diplomatic outcome here. All wars have to end. We need to be thinking more and more about what does that mean, what's on both sides, what's okay, so that this is contained as opposed to exploding into a massive holocaust for not just the region, but for the world.
I was
But
shocked.
what if I really like the explosion? The explosion gives me a certain amount of satisfaction.
Pleasure.
How do I process that?
Right. I mean, am I being naive? I was just so surprised to hear anyone talk about diplomacy.
I know. No, listen, it's amazing. It's like,
Yeah.
this is like seeing a endangered species, a guest on a corporate news show on Sunday morning calling for diplomacy to end this conflict between the world's two nuclear powers. That's a rare thing.
I couldn't believe it. And referring to a holocaust. I mean, nuclear. That was is he going to ever be allowed on television again? You can come. There's always a place for you on Useful Idiots.
Yes,
Michael.
Yeah. But it speaks to, we've talked about this before, the most sane voices on the Ukraine-Russia war from the U.S. establishment, at least, have generally come from the Pentagon, because they're the ones who actually know what the consequences are. They know what this leads to, which is a nuclear holocaust. People who work in the State Department or who work at think tanks, whose job it is not to really come up with policies that keep the peace, but come up with policies that promote war. They don't think about that. Right. So it's interesting always that insofar as you will hear a sober voice from the U.S. establishment, which is pretty rare, odds are that it will probably come from someone who's been in the Pentagon, who knows what the consequences of these policies are.
Right. Which isn't to say all of their voices or all of their comments are sane, but on the rare occasion where you do hear a sane one or sane comment, it probably will be coming from the military, the Pentagon, as opposed to Raytheon or just pundits.
Yeah, exactly.
Or journalists asking about no-fly zones and when they're going to set that up. I still can't get over that. Yeah.
Well, we promised it. So should we do a little update on Nina Jankowicz? Now, this is not from the Sunday news shows, but she's such a fan favorite and the story is so funny.
And it's so relevant.
We can play a few more clips. So Nina Jankowicz, for those who don't know, she was named the head of the newly created Disinformation Governance Board. And after a backlash that saw people point out that she has spread disinformation herself, she promoted the Steele dossier. She promoted the notion that Hunter Biden's laptop was just Russian disinformation. And she also called for outright censorship of her opponents. She promoted this idea where if you have a blue check on Twitter and if you're given a certain expert status by Twitter, then you should have the right to edit other people's tweets. That was one of her genius ideas. So after an outcry about that, she was kicked out of her newly created job. She was forced to resign last week, but now she's on a media tour.
Replaced by Michael Chertoff.
Replaced by another disinformation spreader, Michael Chertoff, the former head of DHS under Bush. And so she's been on a media tour, basically blaming everybody but herself for her own demise. So we have a few clips from that.
Unfortunately and ironically, we were undone exactly by a disinformation campaign coming from folks who apparently want to put our national security behind their own personal political ambitions.
That's a great clip. So, okay, first of all, the Disinformation Board, which is supposed to protect us from disinformation, was undone, according to Nina Jankowicz, by a disinformation campaign. So in other words, you're supposed to be policing disinformation, but you can't even rebut disinformation about you. You know, it doesn't look too good if you're trying to be the disinformation police. And then she says that kicking her out of a job will undermine U.S. national security, which is crazy. So did you know that, Katie, that do you feel more
I'm going to start putting that in my resume. Like, rejection, job rejection is a threat against national security.
Exactly. If you don't hire me for this job, you're threatening national security.
Yeah. No big deal. It's just the demise of democracy.
Yeah. Everyone should do that. Everyone should follow Nina's lead.
That is amazing. She's very triggered.
And then she also went on Chris Hayes' show where Chris gave her a very warm reception.
The experience of being the focal point of this sort of massive frenzy over the last few weeks.
Well, it was really
Right?
overwhelming, Chris. I mean, frankly, I have prided myself over my career of being a really nuanced, reasonable person. Again, as I said, I've briefed and advised both Republicans and Democrats. I admire some of the steps that the Trump administration even took to combat disinformation, including Senator Rob Portman and his bills against deepfakes and, funding the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. So to say that I'm just a partisan actor was wildly out of context. And then beyond that,
Wait, it was out of context? No, that's a line you use when you're misquoted or your quotes are taken out of context. That's not what you say when something just isn't true that someone else says or claims. She's very bad at this job. I could write her talking points.
I love the term nuance. I'm a very nuanced thinker.
Whenever people credit themselves as nuanced, just leave.
Exactly.
Just go get the check. Yeah.
It wasn't just, these mischaracterizations of my work, but it was death threats against my family. Over the last 3 weeks, I have maybe had 1 or 2 days I didn't report a violent threat, something like, we're coming for you and your family. You and your family should be sent to Russia to be killed. Encouragement of me to commit suicide. All of those have been forwarded to the Department of Homeland Security's security services. And, that's not something that is American. That is not how we should be acting when we have disagreements about policy in this country. I think we need to learn how to be adults in the room. And I don't have time for that childishness. I'm not going to let it silence me. I'm going to go forward and continue building awareness about this threat in the future.
She doesn't have time for this childishness, so I'm going to go back to making cover songs of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
And that's how she'll spread the awareness about disinformation.
Yeah.
Which worked out great. Look, nobody should threaten anybody, and it's horrible that happened to her. But that's not an excuse for trying to head a Orwellian board that seeks to police speech, especially when you have the record that she does of spreading disinformation on behalf of the U.S. government. I mean, and our guest, Lev Golinkin, spoke to us about this, where literally she made propaganda that whitewashed Ukrainian neo-Nazis.
Right.
That's her actual experience with disinformation, is spreading it in a really destructive way. And it's so funny that she gets treated as this victim of some sort of personal attack, when really it was people pointing out how absurd it was for there to be a disinformation board in the first place. Even if she herself wasn't such an absurd character, it would still be absurd.
Yeah, I agree. So weird. I credit myself with being a very nuanced thinker. So nuanced that I like Donald Trump.
Yes, so nuanced that I support the anti-free speech actions of the Trump administration.
Yeah. Jesus. All right. Well, this has been a great edition of Monday Morning. And we are going to, of course, have you join us on Call-In. Make sure you like this stream. Everyone like it right now. Let's try to get some likes.
Where are we at in the like to watch ratio? Let's see here.
Yeah.
Still under half. We got to hit 1,000. That's always the rule.
Come on, guys. Everyone like.
Yeah.
Everyone like. On 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right.
Yeah, don't like, if you don't want to like for us, like for nuance. Just give it a like. If you like nuance, then give the stream a like, because that's what we're promoting here. Nuance, not stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe they're hate watching so they can like for Nina.
Oh, that's true.
If you're hate watching, give it a like too.
Yeah.
Give it a like for Nina.
Yeah. Okay. Got to 1K. Great. Maybe we should not start the show until we get to that next time.
Ooh. Playing hardball. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing hardball. Yeah. All right. Don't forget to subscribe to our, oh my God, you got to subscribe to Substack this week, because we got Aaron does some good commentary on a debate he had with a Nazi denier. And it's just great. Lev Golinkin is really an amazing guest, Ukrainian author who has covered the Azov Battalion and other neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. So thank you all so much. And we will see you, you'll see us later this week when we release our episode, make sure you check that you're subscribed and resubscribe if you've been unsubscribed, which is just terrible.
Usefulidiots.substack.com is the place to go. And if you're around now, if you have more time, join us on Callin. The link is in the description.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Make sure it says you already subscribed, but make sure you are subscribed by checking it. Sorry, I'm just responding to the comments because some people have been unsubscribed. All right. Bye, everyone.